And tonight on the Daily Wrap, Russian fighter jets attack Syrian rebels. We'll speak to military expert Fred Fleitz. And does the GOP have a Muslim problem? Also, trust in media at an all-time low. We're at an all-time high here in the Daily Wrap, and we are live from New York City. And welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Joe Concho, along with my trustworthy media member,
We're trustworthy,
Rick
aren't we?
Unger.
We're all trustworthy in this room.
You know why? Because we're opinion people. And you have to trust us because...
Those are the ones they don't trust, I think.
Oh, no. It's all about the... even
about
the fact checkers we're going to talk about.
Checkers? Okay.
The fact checkers need to be checked, apparently.
That's...
And that's pretty disturbing.
Well, this is nothing new.
Well, you know, in Watergate it was at 75%. Now it's all the way down to 40, right?
It's been coming a long time. People don't trust the media.
I got to meet the 40 that do trust the media, but trust us, really, that we're going to give you a great show tonight. And two, Mr. Trustworthy's right. He is a Forbes.com columnist and an Emmy winner because people trust him. He is Bill Tucker. And finally, he's the editor of thewisdomdaily.com and a Washington Post columnist. Brad Hirschfield is here once again. Okay, let's get right to the Daily Download. And today, Russian fighter jets attacked Syrian rebels fighting against the Assad regime. As you know, U.S. forces have been targeting members of ISIS in Syria with airstrikes as well. It's like the end of Top Gun, but different. Anyway, it seems to me like we have two wars going on in one country, and obviously this puts Russia and the U.S. at odds. Here is Secretary of Defense Ash Carter earlier today.
One of the reasons why the Russian position is contradictory is that exactly the potential for them to strike, as they may well have, in places where, in fact, ISIL is not present. Others are present. And this is one of the reasons why the result of this kind of action will inevitably simply be to inflame the civil war in Syria. And why, therefore, it's ill-advised to take this kind of action in support of Assad only without pursuing a political transition there. And that's why we're trying to get them to that same position.
Well, that was uplifting. White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest expressed concern over the airstrikes.
We are seeing the Russians ramp up their support for President Assad. They've been supporting him for quite some time, and it's clear that they've made a significant military investment now in further propping him up. Right now, they are trying to prop up an investment that's about to go south. And we've made clear that any sort of effort to double down on their support for the Assad regime is a losing bet.
Now, prior to launching said air assaults, the Russian government did something that wasn't normal in terms of diplomatic protocol. Here is CNN political correspondent Barbara Starr.
So a Russian general shows up this morning at the embassy in Baghdad and apparently reads your people a note saying airstrikes are going to be in 1 hour. What do you make of that? Is that, as Secretary of Defense, is that acceptable military-to-military relations with you? And where does this leave you if you sit down and talk to the Russian military about a way ahead? Is this not a little bizarre?
Well, you're right. I have been dealing with them for a long time, and this is not the kind of behavior that we should expect professionally from the Russian military professionally, and that's one reason why I think it's a good thing to have an avenue of communication that is less unprofessional than a drop-in.
Drop-in's never good. Let's bring in Fred Fleitz, Senior Vice President for Policy and Programs with the Center for Security Policy. Mr. Fleitz has also held national security jobs for 25 years with the CIA, DIA, Department of State, and the House Intelligence Committee staff. So it appears we have the right guy to talk to here. Fred, some could be confused about what's going on here, and rightly so. Let's start with the big picture. U.S. is at war with ISIS in Syria. Syrian President Assad is at war with the rebels, but not ISIS. And Russia, maybe not, and Russia is supporting Assad's war and also ISIS. Clear as mud, right?
It's very confusing. What we're seeing here is the utter collapse of President Obama's policy for Iraq and Syria. He announced a new policy just a year ago in September to degrade and destroy ISIS. it's been a disaster. We had pinprick airstrikes. We had a program to train moderate rebels. It was supposed to have 3,200 on the ground right now. There's only 6. I mean, it has been an utter disaster that created a vacuum that Russia is rushing in to fill.
Fred, it's Rick Unger. You know, the last thing you said leaves me very curious. I don't entirely disagree with you, by the way, about how poorly it's gone vis-a-vis the United States trying to do something about ISIL. However, is that really the question we're addressing here? I think what we're trying to figure out is, what is Russia there to do? I think many people for the past few days suspected they were there to take on ISIL, which, contrary to what we said earlier, they are an enemy of the Syrian government, but there are other enemies, and then they're enemies of each other, and this is why it gets confusing. So today we find out that Russia is starting their bombing campaign. They've begun it, but they're not bombing ISIL. They're bombing other enemies of the Syrian president. So clearly, what it seems clear to me, what they're really doing there is to do Assad's bidding. If Assad says, look, you know, these are all problems for me, but start with these guys because they're the bigger problem, that's what Russia's doing. Isn't that more like what's going on there? And let's try and address what's happening here as opposed to the whole anti-Obama thing. We'll give it to you as a given that it hasn't gone well.
Well, I think you're right that the priority of Russia right now is to back up the Assad regime. But Russia's presence in there is because American credibility has been so significantly weakened by this policy that collapsed. And I think the Iran deal is part of that. I don't think it's a coincidence that just after this Iran deal, Iran and Russia significantly upped their presence in Iraq and Syria. There's now an alliance between Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Russia to share intelligence against ISIS. I don't think ISIS is the target of Russia here, Rick. I think that the purpose of this, of Russia...
Well, then why is it relevant that they made that deal? To share intelligence against ISIS. And you may be right, I think, that ISIS isn't the target here. So why the other thing? Why is that relevant to this?
I think it is part of a new Russian-backed axis in the Middle East where Russia will become a dominant power, but more importantly, it will become a more reliable regional power. And that's an issue in Egypt, where Russia's trying to sell military equipment and replace the United States as a key ally of Egypt. I don't think that's going to succeed, but you can see that on the horizon.
Fred, it's Brad Hirschfield. I want to follow up on this issue of reliability that you point to. We happen to agree. It seems to me, and I'm no fan of Vladimir Putin's, but it seems to me that U.S. policy has been governed by a kind of eat our cake and have it to approach. And in fact, what Putin has stepped into is saying, yes, I am defending Assad because anything that takes down that supports him allows us to take down his primary enemies, in this case, ISIS. It's a staging issue, it seems to me, and until we can get credible about what we really want and not tell people we can have everything we want in the region, we're going to be hamstrung in ways the Russians simply aren't.
30 seconds, Fred.
You know what? It isn't always about attacking Obama, and I want to say this to Rick. You know, Russia and China have no scruples. They'll support anyone to advance their interests. But if you're a Western state with scruples, supporting some of these dictatorships is hard. I get that. And I think that's a factor that's at play here.
Yeah, I agree with that, Fred. I do. Joe, you want to finish it up?
Yeah, so Fred, eventually if this gets to Russia defeating ISIS, or at least certainly degrading them is a word that we hear a lot, isn't that a good thing? In other words, if I look at, they asked Donald Trump this last night on Fox, they said, look, if you have Assad or ISIS or Russia, which would you take? And he basically said, you know what, if Russia ends up staying there, kind of like an East Germany kind of situation, is that the worst thing in the world compared to what the alternatives are? And we only got a couple seconds, I'm sorry.
I don't think ISIS is going to be defeated by Russia. I think Russia can sustain the Assad regime, but I don't think Putin is in a position to send enough troops to succeed at this.
Right. Either way, this is one big mess, and
That's
we
a very
appreciate you.
interesting comment.
Yes, I agree. We appreciate you coming on tonight, Fred Flight.
Yeah.
We'll talk to you again soon, I am sure, about this topic. So, share your thoughts on the multiple wars going on right now against ISIS by going to newsmaxtv.com/comments. That's newsmaxtv.com/comments. Last word, Bill Tucker.
You know, in some ways, it's be careful what you wish for. We've been in there for years, and it's been a mess. Russia's stepping into it. I don't see it getting any better.
Russia is, this is simple. This is a gamble. If it all goes wrong and Putin gets mired down there, we end up the voice in the Mideast. If it doesn't, he does.
Wow. Crazy stuff. Stay tuned. Back with more in a moment.
So do you believe that Islam is consistent with the Constitution?
No, I don't. I do not. I would not advocate that we put a Muslim in charge of this nation. I absolutely would not agree with that.
And welcome back. That, of course, was Dr. Ben Carson sharing his feelings that Islam is inconsistent with the Constitution. Now, Donald Trump has also come under attack for things he said and a few things he hasn't said about Muslims.
Well, we could be politically correct if you want, but certainly, are you trying to say we don't have a problem? Because I think everybody would agree. I have friends that are Muslims. They're great people, amazing people, and most Muslims, like most everything, I mean, these are fabulous people, but we certainly do have a problem. I mean, you have a problem throughout the world.
What's the problem?
Well, you have radicals that are doing things. I mean, it wasn't people from Sweden that blew up the World Trade Center.
Now, it's comments like that that have resulted in headlines like this from the Washington Post. Republicans pander to anti-Muslim bigotry. But for some supporters of Islam, it has gone much too far. Muslim activist Rubio Jibril has not been happy with how American Muslims have been characterized during the GOP presidential race.
What does Muslims in America have to do with that? Why they need to be criminalized because of that? Would we ever accept a presidential candidate that would apply the same rules, would say the same things about Jews and black? We would never tolerate them, would never respect them, would never expect, even accept them. We will shun them aside. But we accept it against Muslims because sadly, in the Republican base, this is what is appealing to them today.
And Rula had a little bit more to say on the subject.
In the realm of possibility, in a country that is very armed, that somebody that will be carrying weapon will go to a mosque tomorrow or after tomorrow and will start shooting people. And then these people will have blood on their hands, all of them.
So the question must be asked, are the Republican leaders, particularly those running for president, criminalizing and or demonizing the Muslim religion in America, Joe Concha?
Boy, I wish Rula had that kind of passion when I've
She's
seen her
upset.
on CNN.
She's upset.
When we're talking about ISIS cutting people's heads off, she gets awfully indignant when it comes to talking about presidential candidates and everything. But she should be speaking out about Muslim crimes in the same kind of passion.
Wait, let me interrupt you, because that is her point. Yes, there are Muslims around the world doing some unbelievably horrible things. The point she was making in that show, whether you agree or not, was why are we holding American Muslims responsible for not things that they're doing, but things that are happening in other parts of the world?
How do we jump to the narrative that we're holding American Muslims responsible?
Well, that was her point.
Because Ben Carson said, I don't think that a Muslim should be president because the Quran doesn't jive with our Constitution?
Well, she's saying they're being demonized. And by the way, that is a problem with what he said. Unless he's prepared to say that canon law should be treated the same way. You have to realize that Sharia law is a legal system for the Muslim believers. Canon law is the legal system for Catholic believers. But do you believe Ben Carson? Nobody's worrying about that getting.
Do you believe Ben Carson's a bigot, or he just has a difference of opinion and thinks that a Muslim, which is a ridiculous argument, by the way, because there will never be a Muslim president in our lifetimes, because the brand is damaged. What's that?
It's not a ridiculous argument. I agree with you that it won't happen, but that's not a reason to not talk about it, because what Ben Carson suggested, I'm not going to say if he's a bigot or not. I don't know him well enough, but I will say that what he suggested is not in line with the United States Constitution.
It's not, and he's clarified that in further remarks. He has a problem.
He's tried to back away from
he has said if people believe in canon law, that's wrong. If people believe in Sharia law, it's inconsistent with the Constitution.
I'm going to protect him. He didn't say it was wrong to believe in
canon law. You're right. You're right. No, but he's saying if you're going to be president, you have to abide by constitutional law, not by canon law, not by Sharia law. And the people who are demonizing Muslims in America are other Muslims.
Why did he single out Muslims? Because Muslims can believe in the Constitution.
Let's be clear.
In America?
Rick, he was
Have you not seen an American journalist get their head cut off?
He was talking about Americans running for president.
Let's go slow. He was asked about Muslims, so he responded. Okay. And his response included a falsehood and a truth to the statement. He said Islam, is not consistent with the Constitution. That's not correct. But it is correct that Islam, as it is lived by the vast majority of 1.2 billion Muslims around the world, is not consistent with the Constitution. Islam, as is lived by probably over 1 billion of the world's Muslims, is not. It is totalitarian. It doesn't need to be. A Muslim could be president of the United States. If there's one shot at it, will be in this country. We're missing the really important comment, which was the comment made to Donald Trump, which was that we have to get rid of Muslims. His failure was not responding to that. That was a call for mass deportation or murder.
By the way.
This one was supposed to be for you. But since you just gave a speech, it's now for Tucker.
Feel free.
So
That's
Tucker,
the speech we need to hear.
If you make a trip to the Library of Congress and you go into the Thomas Jefferson collection, you'll find that Jefferson's well-worn copy of the Koran is sitting there amongst his literary possessions. Right. And did you know that John Adams, one of our great forefathers, once wrote that the Prophet Muhammad was a sober inquirer after truth? Or for that matter, were you aware that Benjamin Franklin once stated that a Muslim missionary sent by the Mufti of Constantinople would find there was a pulpit at his service in this country. So they didn't have this problem with Muslims and Islam. Why do we want to look at this now and start and have people out there running for president saying, I can't support somebody who's a Muslim for president?
Well, first I'm going to refer back to Brad's speech because he articulated it also well, so thank you, Brad. But no, Carson has been very careful in subsequent interviews. He's doubled down on the fact that no, he cannot support somebody who is a Muslim running for president because he believes that if they're living in accordance with Sharia law, they're in contradiction. They're not in line with the Constitution.
And that's not fair. That's actually not correct. There are ways to interpret and live according to, but most do not. And the reason the Founding Fathers were loose with Muslims, they didn't know any. It was a theoretical,
This is a media-driven narrative against the GOP, asking these questions of them. And also, that was a plant at that Trump rally, by the way. No one talks about that.
And be sure to get your copy of Dr. Carson's New York Times best-selling book, One Nation, What We Can All Do to Save America's Future, by going to newsmax.com/Ben or calling 1-800-655-7567. Do it right now to get your free copy today. Coming up next, Donald Trump and his tax plan.
I've made a decision here with Donald Trump. You know, if I comment on everything he says, I mean, my whole campaign will be consumed by it.
Right. And welcome back to the Daily Wrap. That was, of course, GOP presidential hopeful Marco Rubio speaking last month on Meet the Press, where he promised not to comment on frontrunner Donald Trump. Well, sometimes these things just don't work out quite the way you want. Here's the Florida senator just last week.
He takes shots at everybody that gets anywhere close to him, and it does, you know, in terms of a poll, or anytime he hits a rough spot, that's what he does. He had a really bad debate performance last week. He's not well informed on the issues. He really never talks about issues and can't have more than a 10-second soundbite on any key issue. And so I think he's kind of been exposed a little bit over the last 7 days, and he's a very touchy and insecure guy, and so that's how he reacts, and people can see through it.
So is Donald Trump qualified to be president of the United States?
Well, as I said, I think that the most important thing a president will ever do is provide for the national security of our country. And I think up to now he hasn't really answered serious questions about national security. And until he does, there should be concerns, not just about him, but about any candidate that's not able to speak in detail, with clarity, and with seriousness about the national security threats that we face.
Yeah, okay, so sue him. While Rubio may not have been able to keep his pledges of avoiding the Trump tantrums, it looks like breaking the silence on Donald Trump is actually paying off for Senator Rubio after all, at least according to an NBC Wall Street Journal poll out earlier this week. Oh, we're going to read this. As you can see, back in July, when Senator Rubio refused to buy into Trump's game, he had just 5% of Republican primary support. Now that he's all in, Marco Rubio has risen to third place with 11%. Meanwhile, support for Florida Governor Jeb Bush, I should say former Florida governor, has dropped in half since July, according to this poll. Now, certainly, Rubio's rise in the polls can't just be written off to deciding to engage with Donald Trump. Jeb Bush has also spoken out against Donald Trump fairly regularly during his campaign, and it obviously hasn't done him any good. So, Bill Tucker, why is the Bush campaign doing so poorly?
Because the idea of a Bush-Clinton ticket, once again, is just absolutely not acceptable.
You really think that that's the
Yes,
reason?
I do.
Yeah. Brad, you agree with that?
I think there's a lot of management issues in the campaign that you probably want to get to, and we should, but I think people are exhausted with the status quo. And as much as both Marco and Jeb are inside the political game, Bush, it's multiple generations, it's a different place to be, and I think people are just
more
exhausted.
I want, both of you could be giving a perfectly good explanation, Joe, but I never really see that question, or I haven't, I should say, in a very long time in the polls. They're polling, what don't you like, what do you like, but I don't see that question anymore. Are you against Bush? Just because we don't want any more Bushes.
I'd like to see that question.
I would too.
Because
these guys might have it exactly right.
People don't pay attention the way we pay attention. They do not like the Bush brand. And to answer your question before, Rubio is ahead of Bush now by 4 points because Marco Rubio had 2 great debates.
He did.
And Jeb Bush had 2 very average, lifeless debates, and that's making the difference right now.
I think that's part of it. I do. Okay, well, what might be helping Donald Trump, along with some of the other outside candidates, is that 62% of Americans are upset with the direction the country is going in. On top of that, about 80% of Americans describe themselves as angry with the status quo, and that could speak to the point you guys were making. Anxious about the economy and their financial security, or both. This, again, according to the NBC Wall Street Journal poll. America is clearly not feeling very good about itself these days. So what do these candidates need to do to turn this around, Joe Concha? Is there anything that they can say or do that's going to start to make us feel better about us?
Donald Trump is doing it, right? He is at least saying, I can make America great again, we're not where we should be, and I'm the guy to do it. So that's why his message is resonating.
Well, okay, but Brad, Donald Trump is doing it. I think Joe's right about that, and he is certainly leading in the Republican polls. But at the same time, he has the highest disapproval rate. And that would tend to make you say, no, that's not what's necessarily doing it. He's making some people believe, but not enough.
And I think that's the key. It is making some people. Polarizing messages do exactly that. They polarize the populace. I don't think Americans are feeling bad about themselves. I think Americans are feeling bad about America.
Right.
And as a result, a piece of that America is saying, give me the Donald, I don't care about the specifics, just pump up my sense of who we are as a nation. And the others are saying, it's a dangerous thing, because if you don't know what you're looking for, you'll take any alternative.
Take anything that's a great point. Brad, I mean, are you hearing any candidate on any side, by the way, I'm not just talking about Republicans, who are actually laying out a blueprint where Americans can look at it sensibly and go, that might do the trick. And by the way, in that context, I'm going to give the Donald some points.
Right.
I thought that his tax proposal, I've got some issues with it, but and we haven't dug into it deeply. There were a few things that he suggested that aren't being suggested by anybody else I thought were really good, like cutting a break to small business just because they're small business.
No, I agree. But what's interesting to me is that the Republicans, a number of them, not just Donald, have laid out tax plans, have in fact laid out policy decisions that the newspapers seem to be ignoring and acting like, no, they're not really doing that. Bernie Sanders on the other side is one of those guys speaking in big, broad generalities.
Well, you're right. And hopefully we'll soon get to the substantive part. So who is your pick for the 2016 nomination? Let us know by going to newsmaxpolls.com. Let your voice be heard. And coming up next, America's trusted media, all-time low. Don't go anywhere.
Hi there again. How you doing? We hear a lot about media bias. Well, we always say welcome back to Daily Wrap, and I figured we
turn into the Joey Tribbiani show.
How you doing? Right. Born and bred, Wayne, New Jersey. It's still in me. Anyway, we hear lots about media bias here at Newsmax from you, our loyal and growing audience, and why you simply can't trust them. Well, Gallup released its annual poll on media trust today, and you'll never guess what they found. Is it A, trust in media is making a comeback, or B, trust in media, there it is on the screen, is at an all-time low? Well, you answered B. As you can see, you're correct. Since Watergate, the percentage of Americans who find media as a whole trustworthy is now down 34 points. The drop in media trust is happening as the employment of so-called fact-checkers keeps growing. The Washington Post is arguably the most notable of fact-checkers out there, with its famous Pinocchio scale, cited often in cable news when someone gets caught in a fib, particularly a politician. President Obama, you may remember, if you like your doctor, you can keep it, was a fact-check lie of the year by the Washington Post, for example. But over the past year, the Post had a tough go of it. First, or I should say the past week, first, its fact-checkers came to the conclusion that Carly Fiorina was lying about her resume when stating she's gone from secretary to eventually CEO, giving her 3 Pinocchios because, get this, they say she had more advantages growing up than other secretaries and that her career didn't begin until after she earned her MBA. Seriously, here are the facts. Fiorina, yeah, she was a secretary. She did work her way up the ladder and did become the first woman CEO of a Fortune 20 company. End of story. But then matters got worse yesterday when the same Washington Post fact-checking team sent out this tweet promoting a Planned Parenthood fact check. Now the tweet was fine, but there are your hashtags. Stand with PP, which is Planned Parenthood, and Pink Out, which is a big hashtag among supporters of Planned Parenthood. Now, you could argue whether we have to obviously take money away from Planned Parenthood to fund them all together, or if you support them, like 61% of Americans say they do. That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is, why is the fact checker from the Washington Post sending out supportive hashtags of a particular cause? And this, Rick, is what it goes back to. I know it's subtle, it's just a hashtag, but that is a fact checker.
Listen,
she should be an opinion writer. She wants to have an opinion.
You are right on every count you raised in what you just said. You are. First of all, Carly Fiorina was a secretary, and the fact that she may have had parents that had more money than somebody else's, what in the world does that have to do with it? Right. Somebody comes out of school and decides that they're on their own. I know I was, and I'm sure everybody else here was. You got to go to work where you get a job. Who cares what her parents had? So they were absolutely wrong in that. Your point about the tweet, on the money. I do want to raise just one quick issue. If the people are going to mistrust the media, and I understand why they do, then I want the people to be a little more careful about how you do treat facts when you get them. We've all gotten those tweets that say we're full of it. When we did our homework, told the truth, you just didn't like the truth.
That's right. Sometimes we turn to cable stations or we turn to newspapers that verify our own beliefs. Right. And we're willing to believe whatever's fed to us because that makes us feel better.
And I think that's exactly the key. We have come to a place where we confuse facts with whatever we like to hear. And the reason the media performance trust has gone down is as much because people can shop around now in ways they couldn't a generation ago. Anyone listening to us or anything else can, with a mouse click, go to a site where they will only hear those facts that confirm what they already believe. The only thing I know is if you only hear what you already know, the one thing you're never doing is learning anything.
Bill, you're the only Emmy winner here. Rick was nominated 8 times. But he's like that one on, who was that girl who never won on?
Oh, this is great. So it makes me think
the Susan Lucci of the Emmys.
And I was only nominated for cartoons, so that doesn't count.
I don't know, Rick. Apparently that makes you more credible than me, though.
Anyway, so has news changed that much for America? I mean, do you see a difference in terms of the information that's being fed out? Because, opinion journalism's taken over and therefore we're kind of cherry-picking facts and presenting things that people want to hear?
I got to condense a lot of talking points and some really quick ones, so forgive me if I shorthand it too much. But one, news has always been a point of view situation. You can't tell a story without having a point of view. Acknowledging that point of view, like we do here, is being honest. People can say, we know what their point of view is. And the problem is that now, going back to Brad's point, just today on Facebook I was having a conversation. There is so much misinformation, false quotes, silly facts, things that are just straight out wrong on there that get thrown around as truths over and over and over again. And it's not just Facebook, it's not just the Washington Post. CNN in the middle of the month got the confusion over what immigration visa is, guest workers are. They got it wrong, and I made a post on my Facebook page about it. No, it's what's irritating is that people are pretending that they're objective and pretending to tell the truth, and they're not.
But there's a remedy for that, and this is what I'd like to see happen. Look, if I give an opinion and you disagree with it, as many of you do, hey, your opinion's as good as mine. You just see that the way you see it, and that's your right. I just get paid for it. But if I state something as a fact, you don't have to take my word for it, but go do your homework. Don't hate me because you don't like the fact. Hate my opinion. Big difference.
Right, and Google allows people to do it at home. We get fact-checked here every night. All the time. And no one has yet to find anything in the 8 months that we've been on the air.
Never.
Well, maybe a couple times. Yeah, but anyway, it wasn't intentional. That's the important thing. Anyway, do you trust the media? Can't wait to hear these. Go to newsmaxtv.com/comments and let your voice be heard. Coming up next, we're going to read those viewer comments. Do not go anywhere. Hey there again. Before we get to your viewer comments, our own J.D. Hayward sat down with Ohio Governor John Kasich to talk about immigration and birthright citizenship. Here's a clip.
That should be just off the table. We're not going to go changing the Constitution, and if you're here, you're here.
Section 5 says it can be changed by appropriate legislation.
I think we have enough to have to deal with other than to throw a monkey wrench in there and then debate all that. Let's just get the basics done.
He's so pragmatic. and climbing in the polls slowly but surely, now in the top 6. Anyway, Kasich went on to say, if people come in and they're born in America, then they're Americans as far as I'm concerned. So, if you want to hear more from that interview, be sure to tune into Newsmax Prime tonight with our friend JD at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Okay, first, let's read a comment from Ken, hot off the press. This is literally hot. He says, maybe when so-called moderate Muslims start speaking out about the atrocities committed by radical Muslims and openly condemn, in caps mind you, the acts of groups like Hamas, Hezbollah, ISIS, the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, then maybe those of us who have issues with Islam and Muslims will start to ease our stance.
And,
Rick, you agree, I'm sure.
Well, I love that you made the point, because I got to share a secret with you. I once said something very similar on the radio, and boy, did I get an earful from members of the Muslim community. And I promised that I would go off and do my homework, and I did. And here's what I discovered. Muslims in a position, moderate Muslims, who are in a position to get on television, to get on the radio, they were getting every booking they could, and what they all told me is, we'll come anywhere you'll have us. You have to be fair and realize that, I don't know, 99% of that moderate Muslim you're talking about, just like everybody else, man. They get up and go to work in the morning, they earn a living, they come home at night, they spend some time with their kids, and they go to bed to get ready for the next day. They aren't people who can be out there selling the cause of what you're asking them to do. It can only be those people who can get booked. And I'll tell you what, they're not getting booked as much as they should be. They are trying. And even the newspapers, I did a study on this, when they go out there and they do these things and they protest against Islamic militancy, the papers don't cover it because it's not a good story. When they go out there and they support the Islamic radicals, then the newspapers show up because that's a great story. So we have to put some reality into that.
Okay, we'll have to leave that here. We have more comments to get to. We asked you, who should replace John Boehner as Speaker of the House? Lois says, I don't feel that any of the current sitting representatives should be promoted to Speaker in light of the abysmal job they are currently doing. I believe Congress is at a 14% approval right now. Boehner's recommendation of McCarthy should be enough to disqualify him. Trey Gowdy needs to stay on, of course, until President Trump, listen to that, can appoint him as Attorney General. Interesting. When we finally get a Justice Department, Mr. Gowdy would serve us well. As far as I know, there's no statute of limitations on treason, is there? Wow, a lot to discuss with that one.
Holy
Wow.
cow.
I mean,
that's a grab.
I'm not even going there.
Can we
Okay,
just go?
well,
Can we just go back to Monday when we talked about the fact that Rick could be Speaker?
Yeah, that's a good
Anybody
point.
can be, that's
but
right.
what we're hearing a lot and seeing a lot from our commenters and on the Twitter and so on is that Trey Gowdy seems to be the favorite of a lot of people on that side of the party.
And I don't resent that or have a problem with that if he'll just get a better haircut.
But he's made,
So we wouldn't talk about
clear
hair in
too.
the
He
show.
doesn't want to be it. So
Anyway, Bill?
no, he made it clear that he doesn't want to be there. So he made it clear he's happy over in the Benghazi committee and he's going to stay there.
Reluctant warrior, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, so we also asked you what you thought of Planned Parenthood's alleged wasteful spending. Margaret says, define Planned Parenthood. A regular health clinic can provide women with all the health care needs she needs, i.e. mammograms, birth control, education, etc. You just define Planned Parenthood, Margaret. That's what they do. Yes, it's a wasteful spending program that we don't need. You know, you may be right, Margaret. I'm just going to throw this in, but I found it very hard to listen to a congressman try and make that point, given how wasteful their spending is and how he's being overpaid.
Staying with that theme, Patrick says, I think there should be a government shutdown. Democrats and the mainstream media make it sound like the whole country will come to a screeching halt when, in fact, only non-essential agencies will stop operating. The GOP should force a shutdown and let President Obama explain why. Unger.
Lenny says, I don't understand why Planned Parenthood is even needed. We have Obamacare, so doesn't that make Planned Parenthood redundant? No, it doesn't. As far as abortions are concerned, taxpayers should not have to fund that, get it done privately, or have the baby. Lenny, just a couple quick things. Taxpayers do not fund abortions. It's against the law. Planned Parenthood is a provider. They are in places where a lot of people can't go to find other people who will take them in as patients. So that's why they're there. And by the way, Lenny, all due respect, your name is Lenny. If your name's Loretta, I'm going to give it a lot more credibility when you make comments like that.
Okay, and one more. We want to talk about Donald Trump's tax plan. Jerry says, once again, the middle class gets the crush of the taxes. We carry the burden and pay the most. No more, get fair.
I think it's to you now, Joe.
Okay,
We're out of
very
time.
good. Well, let's talk about what we're talking about next, and that's yay or nay. Lots of great, great topics. But first, if you want to weigh in on any of the issues we talk about here in the show, be sure to send us your comments. And as you can see, we read them on the air. And be sure to get your copy of Dr. Carson's new New York Times best-selling book, One Nation, What We Can All Do to Save America's Future, by going to newsmax.com/Ben or calling 1-800-655-7567 right now to get your free copy today. Up next, the aforementioned yay or nay.
Are you a Hillary Clinton supporter?
I sure am.
What about Donald Trump?
Next.
No, you don't support
Donald Trump, nah, not so much.
I feel cold towards Donald Trump.
You wouldn't support Donald Trump?
No.
Okay, and would you support Hillary Clinton's plan to cut the corporate tax rate from 35% to 15%?
I think that's a good idea.
Do you support Hillary's plan to eliminate the estate tax?
Yes, I do support that.
Do you support her plan to eliminate taxes for those who make less than $25,000 a year?
I would support that, yes.
Do you support her plan to eliminate the alternative minimum tax?
Alternative minimum tax. Yeah, I support that.
Do you support her plan to eliminate the estate tax?
Yes.
And what would you say if I told you those are all Donald Trump's proposals?
I would say he's a pretty smart man. I feel stupid.
I would say that that's shocking.
What would you say if I told you those are all Donald Trump's policies?
I wouldn't believe you.
They are.
Well, I support Donald Trump then.
What would you say if I told you those are all Donald Trump's policies?
Oh, God. I hate him.
That's really
not
good.
a personality
that
contest
was
or
truth.
anything. Welcome
really
back
good.
to Daily Wrap. You're not low information voters out there, now are you? And that was a clip from Jimmy Kimmel Live, proving Jimmy's theory that people will stick with the candidate they choose no matter what they say. And it's happy time, people. It's time for yay or nay. First up, there is a war brewing between two GOP candidates right now, and one of them, seriously, is not Donald Trump. We ain't kidding. No, this time the battle is between Kentucky Senator Rand Paul and Texas Senator Ted Cruz. Things really blew up yesterday when Paul said in an interview on Fox News Radio that Senator Cruz couldn't accomplish anything in the Senate because of how much his colleagues despised him. Is Rand Paul looking to take everyone else down with his Titanic of a campaign, Rick Unger?
Well, first of all, the fact that they don't get along is nothing new at all. This has been going on for a long time. That said, he's right. What Senator Paul said is the truth. Nobody in the Senate does like Ted Cruz, and he can't accomplish anything in the Senate because he is. You would expect him to alienate Democrats. He has alienated so many senators on his side of the aisle that he's a pariah at this point.
Wow. What do you think, Bill?
Well, I think Rand Paul is definitely trying to engage in a fight with Ted Cruz, but it's humorous to me because these are two single-digit campaigns trying.
No, I think he was just telling the truth because he was. Yeah.
So I would say Rand who? Because he's really disappeared, so he probably is, to Bill's point. I think the Senate at its best is actually why Cruz doesn't play. Well, I don't think he's despised or hated, but it is more pragmatic and less dominated by doctrine and dogma. And Cruz has staked out a position in the Senate that reads much more like a congressman.
Can I ask a general question, but you only have 10 seconds to answer?
Can I come back on that real quick?
Yeah.
As somebody who talks to senators
I
and
understand
congressmen for a
both
living,
do.
they
Hated,
despise
despised,
him.
I know.
Okay. So there's nothing that prevents him from being Speaker of the House, right? Because you don't have to be a member of Congress.
Anybody can be Speaker of the House.
He absolutely
I
can
think that would
be.
be the perfect job for him.
Oh my God.
I think he'd love that.
Just
saying.
Actually, you're right.
Write us. Tell us what you think. Newsmax.com/comment. Anyway, next, the Military Religious Freedom Foundation has sent an email to military commanders complaining about a sign on a Marine base that reads, "God bless the military." The base in question is a Marine base in Hawaii, which houses over 9,000 troops and their families. The sign, which was installed in the wake of the 9/11 attacks, reads in its entirety, "God bless the military, their families, and civilians who work with them." MRFF's founder, Mikey Weinstein, said that they had received at least 23 complaints about the sign, which they call unconstitutional violation of the separation of church and state. Is this a violation of the Constitution, Rick Unger, yay or nay?
I'm not sure. My inclination is no, but but I have to tell you, there's absolutely nothing about that sign that troubles me at all.
Interesting.
No, that's not a violation of the Constitution in any sort of. It's a blessing. It doesn't really.
There's no violation. Mikey Weinstein has occasionally picked a good fight, but there's never a fight he likes to miss, and this is one he should have checked out on.
Very good. Okay. Well, I'm afraid that's all for tonight. What do you think of Kim Davis, by the way, meeting with the Pope quickly?
Not surprising, and I think it would have been interesting if the Pope or the Vatican had proactively announced the meeting and why they were having it.
Okay. Final word?
Listen, I've been saying about the Pope all along. I'm still with it. Who cares?
Okay.
He can do what he wants.
Very good. Well, thank you, panel. We appreciate you being here tonight. And on behalf of Rick Unger and the rest of our staff, thank you for joining us tonight. The Steve Malzberg Show. That's next.